was always dismissed as a folly of being no architectural importance. It was just a sham built to some rich man's whim. Although it's very visible to the traveller and to the visitor, it's always been dismissed because they say it's one room thick, it's just a wall. But it's got so much character and so much to offer. It is a piece of art which has been sadly neglected. It fills that historical and architectural gap in the history of the UK.
Mark Baker is an expert on the wonderful castle which overlooks the North Wales coast at Abergele. He developed his fascination for Gwrych Castle as a 9-year-old boy.
It must have been in about 1994 when I went to Rydal in Colwyn Bay, and we were passing the castle every day. And I just thought, I've been looking at this building for so many years now, I don't know anything about it. I've looked in the libraries and stuff and I couldn't find any books. So I started to research into the history, going to the local archives, and I found many conflicting stories on the history and all various legends that the castle was built in medieval times by some wealthy landlord or something like that, and it turned out to be completely untrue, because it was built in 1819 by a hereditary landowner called Lloyd Hesketh Bamford Hesketh, who came from the Abergele area and also from Lancashire. The two families intermarried, the Heskeths and the Lloyds, and he decided to build the castle in memory of his maternal ancestors, who were one of the princely families of ancient Wales. It was more of a fantasy to fulfil his dreams about being this wealthy lord living in a castle. And he was one of the first people to start the romantic, picturesque movement of the castellated style. That's why Gwrych is of such great importance. I don't think originally it was intended to be so dramatic. It was more of just a central keep with a couple of outlying walls. Over time it just gradually became this gigantic pile of walls and turrets. Over time the family got bored of just taking in the land rents and just added wings and new towers and everything. It's the first of its kind in Europe, and it serves as a blueprint for the other mock castles along the North Wales coast, such as Bodlwyddan, Penrhyn Castle. I wrote a letter to the editor of the Daily Post. I was just disgusted by the state of the building and the lack of information on the history. And all of a sudden, a reporter turned up at the door, and they said that they would like to do an article and take some photographs of me at the castle. And they did a large article in the Daily Post. I think it was page 3, a full page. I couldn't believe it. And they had, like, you know, the billboards with, like, Castle Boy wants to save Gwrych. I think it was a combination of my young age and my enthusiasm that they picked up on the story. A couple of years later, in about 2001, I decided it was about time that we looked into registering a charity for the house. People have been saying, why don't you do this, for about 7 or 8 years, but it wasn't time. I wasn't old enough.
Well, you're still only 16 then, aren't you?
Yes. But I did it basically single-handedly. We just got solicitors to witness all the signing of the documents. And we registered the charity, Gwrych Castle Preservation Trust. There's so much information here at the Trust's archives. Just looking at the photographs of the house, you can just spot something you haven't seen before. It's just got a fascinating history, which is being disregarded by so many.
The castle was sold by the 13th Earl of Dundonald in 1946, and after that went through many changes and many owners. It's had a children's zoo, a miniature railway, and was even used for jousting tournaments. Then, in the late 1980s, it was sold again for £750,000.
It was bought in '89 by an American property developer and his consortium, who wanted to turn it into an opera centre, while the house into an opera school, while building an opera centre on the site of the formal gardens and jousting area.
we think that this castle has more beauty and romance left in its lifetime than anywhere that we've ever looked.
Their plans fell through when there was a legal wrangle, and the owner said that he wasn't able to do anything with the building because he didn't own it.
The exact details of ownership were to take years to sort out, but the immediate outcome was that once the Opera House plans fell through, no work was done, and the building sadly deteriorated. Its problems had only just begun.
When I first went there in about '94, you could walk around most of the building, but there was a caretaker there, so you couldn't actually go inside. Most of the roof was intact. This would have been the private entrance to the castle, and this is where the family would have been dropped out outside, and they would have descended the staircase. Up here would have been the chapel, and down the corridor were the private apartments of the family. At the very end of the corridor would have been the Countess's apartments, which consisted of a bedroom, dressing room, bathroom and study. The greatest decay started end of '95-'96 when the New Age travellers took up residence at the site. They said they were going to be the guardians of Gwrych. It was just a convenient place for them to be housed. They were away from the public. It was on private land. The owner was in the middle of this legal wrangle. Council didn't do anything for 18 months. Most of the slates were taken off systematically and piled up and sold. Coping stones were sold off as well. All of the stained glass were removed. Most of the wooden fixtures were burnt for firewood. All the marble was sold off, fireplaces, etc. Tiles were sold off. I remember the Minton tiles were being piled up in front of the house. Here would have been the fireplace of the Countess of Dundonald, with her initials W.D., Winifred Dundonald. And today we can just make out some of the wheat sheaves of the family, some of the heraldry, and the Tudor roses, Lancastrian rose, because they came from Lancaster, or Lancashire, the family. It was intact until about 2000 when someone lit a fire and it just disintegrated the fireplace. It is a very important room. There was about 120 in the whole of the site, and I don't think any of them today have got a floor or a roof in. And it just goes to illustrate how the place has just been left by everyone, really. This would have been the breakfast room. It was added in the 1840s, and over here we've got what was the dumb waiter, which went down to the kitchens. This room was designed in, I think, an Indian style because of the, it was fashionable back then. So you've got these like Moorish arches, and it's a very atmospheric room, this. It was one of the rooms which was in use daily by the family. And they would have come down the staircase and into here, received the morning papers and had their afternoon tea here as well. This room illustrates what's happened with the rest of the building. The floor has actually been lifted. It hasn't collapsed. All the floorboards have been stolen or burnt. And the ceiling above has collapsed because of the roof has been removed. The staircase would have been originally all white marble, and then up on the walls would have been a dado rail of green marble. Quite ostentatious, but it set off the rest of the house. I can imagine how it would have been, because especially when the light's fading and you can't see all the debris, you can just see the outline of the whole of the staircase. You can sometimes just imagine back when the family were here and it was in its prime. This was one of the 6 lighter windows, which was designed by Thomas Rickman, and it was made out of cast iron and contained all of the heraldry of the family. There would have been a window seat here, and I'm not sure if you could actually see out of this window because of the stained glass, but it would have cast lots of colourful shadows over the staircase, which must have been quite spectacular. If you just scratch at the surface, you can see the different layers being revealed and the different tastes of the different eras and family who lived here. Most of the glass is gone now, and this is just a reminder of the family who were here. It's like they're just kind of in the background still when you find something like this.
After the break, we meet the castle's millionaire American owner and hear of his latest ambitious plans for the future of Gwrych. It was Winifred Bamford Hesketh who had married the 12th Earl of Dundonald. They'd had an arranged and unhappy marriage, and she subsequently had a close relationship with the local bishop, who became the Archbishop of Wales. But during her and the Earl's time at the castle, together or alone, their influence had extended far beyond the walls.
We're in the village hall at Llandulus at the moment, and this place was built by Winifred, Countess of Dundonald. She was the last of the Heskeths to live at the castle, and she paid for this building in 1910. And she had an arranged marriage to the Earl of Dundonald, and it was quite an unhappy marriage, and she spent most of her time being a benefactor to the local community, just to like fill the gap in her life. And this building is evidence of that. She was quite headstrong. He was quite a tyrant to some of the staff, and that was one of the reasons why he got chucked out of the castle. She defied her husband by remaining in North Wales, refusing to go to Scotland, and to him the castle became a place of utter hatred, and she just found solace with the Archbishop, and they were together for a number of years, about 10 years. They just were not suited, the Earl and Countess. They were complete opposites. I think if they had been in love and had got along, then I think it would have been a completely different story now. We probably wouldn't have been here. The people of Llandulus were always highly regarded by the Countess, and I think they regarded the family with high esteem. This church was built by Robert and Alan Bamford Hesketh of Gwrych Castle. They were the parents of the Countess, and they paid for the whole of this building to be built in 1868. Like the castle was built as a memorial to the maternal ancestors of Lloyd, this place was built for the more recent family members who had died. Virtually every Sunday, her parents and herself and her children would come, and they would sit at the front of the church in their pew. And she also got married here to the Earl in 1878, about 10 years after the church had been built. She's buried outside in the Hesketh plot.
But Mark Baker is ensuring that the Countess's memory lives on, with the publication this month of his latest book, his third. His earlier books about Gwrych Castle have sold out.
Thank you. I started writing that in about 2000, after my second book came out, and it's a biography of the Countess of Dundonald, the last of the Hesketh family to live there, and the most controversial of the figures, but also the most interesting. She's one of these independent personalities who want to, just stand out in time, and sadly, because of the problems with her husband, he slowly tried to erase her from history. All of her documents were burned. There's only one surviving portrait of her. All the rest were destroyed by her husband. It's such a shame, but hopefully the new book will bring her lost history to life. The exhibition usually attracts a couple of hundred people each year, And that's a few hundred more people who know about the history of the building and the plight which it's gone through in recent times. At the moment we're standing in the remains of the conservatories. This was the window of the north wall, overlooks the parkland, and it was somewhere where the family would come and just sit and maybe entertain some guests in the beautiful formal gardens of the castle. There are remains of the original planting because the gardens were untouched until, well, up until the 1920s. So you can walk around and see all the different ferns and yew trees and all the laurels. They've got every type here, and the orchids. I think in certain parts of the gardens you can imagine how it used to be. It's taken me over 8 years now to have as much information as I have got. And it was just the research for the books, everything kind of was brought together. I think it's just memories of people who lived here and worked here and even visited. We find it very difficult just to sit back and watch it deteriorate. It's disheartening, it's saddening, and we'd like wanting to do something, but we can't because of the private ownership.
One of those private owners lives here in the shadow of the Hollywood Hills outside Los Angeles. Nick Tavaloni, a real estate developer, has spent much of the last 14 years trying to unscramble a legal mess around the purchase of the castle. He's full of praise for Mark.
I believe Mark Baker is a young, aggressive, knowledgeable young man that has, over the years, seen the Gwrych Castle in a state that was beautiful. He has seen it deteriorate, and he's trying to do something to bring it back to life.
He claims he was misled over the availability of funding when he and his consortium bought the castle. So looking back, how does he feel now about buying such a property so far from home?
Am I happy with getting involved with the Gwrych Castle? If the information given to me at the start would have been fulfilled and the people lived up to what they had committed to do with us, I would have been more than happy. For the last many years, we have been in contact with several people for the development and purchase of the castle. The main thing that we would like to do is build some chalets in the forest around the properties. We also are in contact with a gambling casino where we would like to go over and build probably a 10 to 15,000 square foot building adjacent to the castle. That would be a very, very big factor for that area. There would be a lot of employment, and we should have a fairly good idea of where that situation is within the next 30 days for sure. The reason that I believe Mark Baker would be agreeable and his group to developing the castle into a major hotel would be something that he would cherish to see, because if his main interest and intent is to see the castle refurbished back to its natural state, I believe that that is going to be one of the ways that it's going to happen quicker.
It sounds very familiar. We've heard it over the past 14 years along the same lines, and nothing's ever happened. The proof is in the pudding, so until we see something happening up here, then we just have to carry on as we are.
So who does Mark blame for the sorry state the remarkable 200-year-old castle and its wonderful grounds are now in?
The owner had his hands tied because of the legal wrangle, and if he didn't have money, then he couldn't have done anything, because private individuals can't access grant aid. CADU doesn't, well, they don't have the power to serve works notices and CPOs. They can request it. They've been doing their job and they relisted it up to grade 1. That's all they can do really. The council have the power to compulsory purchase and also to serve any of these works notices in the absence of an owner. So I think the greatest blame does lie with the council. There's three options really. First one would be to let it continue how it is, so it'll end up as a pile of grade unlisted rubble. The second one, which seems to be quite unlikely, would be for it to be a commercial venture, but looking at the state of the building, it's too far gone. I think the costs of restoration would outweigh the profits of the place. And the third one would be for it to be a public amenity, maybe taken over by some sort of charity or trust, who would be working with the public's interests.
If the current negotiations that I'm working on with the private investor group and also with my group fall through, we would probably sit down and talk with the Mark Baker and his group in regards to some type of monetary transaction that we could work out with them, either based on a lease or sale. We're certainly embarrassed at times to think that we weren't able to perform based on information given to us. But hopefully we're going to be able to rectify that all, and the next 60 days is going to tell the tale.
And no one will be watching more closely than the young man, now aged 18, whose interest in the castle was first sparked as a 9-year-old, gazing up at the battlements.
It's the people's building, really. It isn't. It doesn't come down to one person. It should be belonging to the people of Wales, because it's part of a national heritage. It's an integral part of that piece of history of the early 19th century. And it's just a great shame that it's been allowed to deteriorate to the point where its future is so uncertain. I think most of the people of the locality are very interested, but you get the small minority who just say, it's a folly on the hillside, pile of rubble, who cares, knock it down. But I think in years to come, if that was to happen, they would look back in hindsight and say we really lost something important to the district and to the nation.
Next week, the remarkable story of Cardigan Castle and the last private owner to live there. Her unconventional lifestyle left her historic home crumbling. That's next Tuesday evening at 7:30.